to the SDG Warriors Podcast. I'm Sumar Mohanty, the team lead and the student coordinator for the SDG Warriors, a team of passionate student changemakers and STEMness on a mission to meet the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals by 2030, leveraging the power of STEM education and the 21st century skills. Brought to you by us SDG Warriors, this podcast features stories and inspiring adventures from EDUheroes and STEM experts, ideal for students, teachers, parents, and pretty much everybody interested in STEM education and social impact. This podcast aims to provide enriching learning experiences and drive positive change in local, global, and digital communities. Today, we are going to be in conversation with Mr. Matt Miller, the pedagogical Ethan Hunt, who's always one step ahead of the textbook syndicate. To give a bit more formal introduction, with over a decade experience, Mr. Miller is dubbed as the head textbook ditcher and has created unique learning experiences for his students through technology and creative teaching methods. He has transformed teaching using his books like Ditch That Textbook, Ditch That Homework, Don't Ditch That Tech, and Tech Like a Pirate, to name a few. As a Google-Certified Innovator, he holds a mark of distinction for the cutting-edge use of G Suite tools in the classroom. He's also recognized as one of the top 10 influencers in educational technology and e-learning worldwide. Mr. Matt provides practical, use-it-in-class tomorrow solutions to meet teachers' needs, helping them to focus on keeping education and learning relevant for students like us. It's such an honor to have you today on our show, Mr. Matt.
Well, thank you so much, Samar, for that great introduction and for your enthusiasm. I am definitely ready for this episode. Let's do this.
All right. So before we jump into the conversation, to help our listeners audibly visualize the entire experience, can you please tell us, where are you right now? What's the weather like outside? And what can you see from your window?
Okay. Good question. So where am I located? I'm at my home here in Indiana in the United States, which is in the Midwest. So, I'm surrounded by lots of farmland and lots of, woods and trees and all of that. The weather outside is warm and partly cloudy. And from my window, you know what? I might as well just show you out my window. I can see, so this is my backyard, and so I can see trees and then my yard and everything right out my back window.
That looks fantastic. As for me, I'm located in Bangalore, India, where the night has just settled in. It's 10:38 p.m. and a pleasant 20 degrees Celsius, but the chilliness is looming in. The city's notorious traffic has quietened and it's replaced by a soothing silence. From my window, I can see the cloudy dark sky. However, the twinkling lights of the metropolis is set against its backdrop. So that's where we are located. So now we have set the mood. Let's start right from the beginning and take a walk down memory lane. Mr. Matt, can you please tell us, what did your childhood and school days look like, and how did it impact the work you do with students and teachers today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, excuse me. When I was in school, my childhood and school days, what did those look like? Well, I went to an elementary school that was maybe a mile or two away from my house. So I rode the bus to get there. Now, here in the United States, our traditional elementary schools usually mean that you're in one classroom with one teacher, and there's lots of desks and there's lots of classwork and everything. When I was in elementary school, I was in what they call a Montessori school, which gave the students lots of flexibility to go try different learning materials, whatever we were interested in. So it gave us lots of freedom. So it really felt to me like there was a room full of educational toys and I got to play with them whenever I wanted to. So that was a pretty nice experience. And then, outside of school, there was a park about 3 blocks away from my house. So I'd ride my bike down there and swim, or go play on the playground equipment or whatever. And, I think the work that, or the impact that it had on what I do with students and teachers is that, I'm a big fan of giving students choice and freedom, wherever possible, because I had so much of that during my elementary school days, during my early days. And it had such an impact on the student that I would become. And so I always like to try to emulate that whenever I can.
That's wonderful. It sounds like those early experiences gave you a unique perspective on education, and all the freedom that you experienced during your school days truly made you want to also implement that in your classroom as a teacher and give your students the free voice, choice, and agency that they need to ask important questions, become curious, and use their minds for being the change. So
Yes.
now that we've got that covered, can you take us back to the moment when you first realized that you wanted to teach, and especially when you wanted to ditch that textbook in your classroom?
Yes, I can definitely do that. So I was not I didn't take the traditional teacher route. Usually you go to college and you declare that you want your major to be education, and then you go through all of your education classes and everything. But that wasn't me. I was a journalism major, which meant that I wanted to be a writer. I specifically wanted to be a newspaper reporter or a newspaper editor. And so I went through my journalism career, got some internships at some newspapers, got lots of writing experience, and then got out in the real world and got my first writing job at a newspaper, and I hated it. And I decided that that was not for me. But then on my days off, my wife was a teacher. And so sometimes I would go into her classroom on my days off, and I remember just looking around going, something feels right about this. And so after a long career of 3 months as a professional newspaper reporter, I went back to school so that I could study to become a teacher. And so then not too long after that, I had my first class of students. And during those first few years of teaching, I started to see, I was teaching high school Spanish. So I'm a world language teacher. And so I was teaching these students right out of the textbook, textbooks and worksheets and questions out of the back of the book and everything. And my students were really struggling to be able to speak Spanish. And I wanted them to be able to speak Spanish. And so little by little, I just started trying things. I thought, if these activities out of the textbook aren't working, there's got to be something better. And so I just started experimenting with some things with technology, some things with creativity, with storytelling, just with all different things, until eventually I needed my textbooks little by little by little by little less, just like less and less and less did I need my textbooks, until eventually one day I was just like, I don't know why I have these things anymore. And so little by little, I started to ditch that textbook even before I realized that that's what I was doing.
Hearing about that moment of realization, how it propelled you towards such transformative teaching methods, which empowered skills like creativity, critical thinking, and problem solving in students, gives us so much more context. And Mr. Matt, you mentioned that you did a major in journalism. And now that we know you've had a diverse background in that, we were curious to know that as a former newspaper reporter, how did your background in journalism influence your approach to teaching? And did you find any surprising similarities between the two fields?
Samar, that's a fantastic question. So my background in journalism definitely did influence my approach to teaching, because journalism is sort of a subcategory of communication. And so I was in college, I was studying how to be a better communicator. And I think that had a huge impact on me as a teacher, because I was always trying to find ways that I could communicate more efficiently and more effectively, communicate more clearly. I feel like there's lots of teachers out there that will talk a lot, but not say very much. And so I always tried to do the opposite. I tried to be very intentional about the words that I used, and even in the teaching materials that I created. I tried to bring some creativity to those, and then I tried to make them as clear and concise as possible. And so, I think that there are definitely some similarities between the fields, because in journalism, when I was a newspaper reporter, I was trying to tell a story. I was trying to communicate a message. And really, that's what teaching is. Teaching is a lot of telling stories and communicating clear messages. And so I think there's a lot of crossover between the two.
Well, that connection between journalism and the way you described that, it helped you to improve your communication skills, and the way that you learned how to tell a story and use those storytelling elements to make your lessons even more interesting for students like us. I think that really highlights the importance of making sure that students are paying attention in meaningful ways. And building on that idea of engagement, I'd like to dive into the concept of student voice in the learning process. In your book, Ditch That Textbook, you have highlighted the role of student voice in learning. So, how can we students advocate for more innovative practices in our classrooms?
That's a great question. So, I think that student voice is really, really important. I think, whenever students have an opportunity to express themselves and talk about what's important to them, whether it be the way that learning is happening in the classroom or about their own interests or about the things going on in the world, that really prepares you all for the future, to be able to use that voice and to know, how to advocate for the things that are most important. And so I think it's important for students to advocate for innovative teaching practices if that's what they want. Of course, I think that's definitely a sort of a lesson in life of how do you push for something that you think is important, but how do you do it respectfully? How do you do it clearly? How do you do it persuasively? Because, it'd be easy for students to, just walk up to the teacher and say, I don't like what you're doing. And then, that's not a very respectful way. And then all of a sudden that relationship starts off on the wrong foot. But if you can learn how to do that, that's persuasion. And persuasion is such an important part of life. If there are important things that need to happen, persuasion is how you help other people understand the vision that you have, and you encourage them to get on board with that vision. And so I think it's an important, it might not be in the curriculum, it might not be in the pages of the textbook, but it's an important thing that I think students should get every opportunity to do.
Absolutely. Empowering students to take charge of their own learning. It's so crucial, especially these days, to own what we learn and to advocate for big changes. Now, Mr. Miller, it's evident that when students speak, it can lead to big positive changes. And talking about that, we wanted to know what's one of the most memorable light bulb moments that you have experienced with your students, and what made it so special and impactful.
Okay, there are lots of stories that I could probably pick from. Depends on the day, So today, this is the one that I'm going to go with. Is I remember one of the times when I decided that I needed to try some new things when I was teaching Spanish, and one of the things I wanted to do was incorporate more storytelling into it. This was a way for me to help students learn the new language by getting lots of repetitions with their new vocabulary words and their new grammar. And one way that we did that was through storytelling. Now, this was very different from the way that I had done it in the past. Because, a lot of times whenever kids learn a new language, they have to do it through lots of verb conjugation drills and lots of long vocabulary lists and everything. And that just was not working for my students. So I started to make this shift to more storytelling. And so we would practice our new vocabulary and our new grammar by making up these silly stories where the students were the stars of my stories. So I'd make the stories up about my students, and then the students would help me pick out what happened next in the story. And I still remember seeing, some of my students come back in to class the next day, and all of a sudden there was, this vocabulary was sticking. These new language concepts, they were sticking, and they would come back in and they would just, say some of the things to me in Spanish that we had been practicing. And I was like, wow, that's so cool to see that, sometimes if you try something creative, innovative, out of the box, that's just, not the norm, If the norm isn't working for you and it's not getting you the results that you want, maybe you need to try something different. And that was that was a light bulb moment for me as a teacher, that I need to try some things outside of my comfort zone. But it was definitely a light bulb moment for my students, because they were finally going, okay, I can remember this. I can learn a new language now. And I thought that was huge.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that with our audience today. Definitely, moments like these are truly special and they highlight the power of innovative teaching. I remember one of the aha moments that I had in class, when my biology teacher, she chose to represent the cell organelles in a way by which we had to play these cell organelles. So we know that mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell. So the students actually dressed up as runners, as chefs, the way that they interpreted the powerhouse of the cell. So that was, so basically we remembered those things. And I think that's the importance of visual storytelling, that when you're even performing things in the exam, then at that point of time, when you're writing the answers, you remember the experiences that you had with your friends when they played that particular role. So
Yes.
I remember that aha moment. So, Mr. Matt, now on to the topic of innovation. You're known for your expertise with Google tools as a Google-Certified Innovator. So, based on your expertise, we'd love to know that what lesser known G Suite tool you think students and teachers should explore more.
That's a great question. So the Google tool, the G Suite tool that I go to a lot is Google Slides, but that's not a lesser known tool. That's one that's very, very well known. So I think I'm actually going to turn to to Google Gemini. Gemini is the new AI tool. And so I think this is definitely something. Now, of course, you have to use it within the terms of use. And so students might not be old enough to use it right away. But, having one of these AI assistants like Google Gemini to be able to ask questions to have it help you to study, to have it help explain things differently to you, to be able to create, help you to create things like song or poetry lyrics, or, the wording for, excuse me, the wording for like a TV commercial, or, even helping you to generate ideas for a research paper or something. Like having that at your side, at your fingertips, I think is something that as we go forward into the future is going to become more and more common. And I think, students need to know what it's capable of, what good it can do. Also be aware of the ways that it doesn't get things right, so that we can prepare ourselves for that too. So I'd say if anybody's watching this and they haven't tinkered with Google Gemini yet, it's becoming something that I turn to for ideas, and also kind of like for a first draft on certain things. Now, there's lots of things that we still want to do as humans, right? Because it helps us to learn, helps us to develop our skills, helps us to express ourselves. And I think that's important. But sometimes you just need a first draft of something, or you just need some ideas. And I really do like turning to Google Gemini for that.
Absolutely, Mr. Matt. I can agree with that, because I've experimented with Gemini, and sometimes we need a soundboard. Sometimes we need something to start with. So I think these AI tools, whether it's Gemini, whether it's ChatGPT, or any other chatbot, as you can say, which uses generative AI, it can provide you a starting piece to build upon and use your skills to its maximum potential. You don't have to, I would say, spend more time into actually thinking about the entire how to start the thing, because it can help you with getting started, but then later you can use your skills to build upon that and get your outcomes, as you say.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So now moving on to the next question. You talked about technology, and finding the balance is key to maximizing the benefits of technology in education. And with, like you mentioned, AI is coming, it's the new boom. Speaking of ensuring access, I would like to discuss an important challenge that many of us face. So, Mr. Matt, how do you address the digital divide, ensuring that all students have equal access to technology that they need for learning?
Oh, that's a huge topic, isn't it? I mean, we can try to do everything that we can in the classroom to ensure that everybody gets the same experience, the same access to education in the classroom. But if the technology isn't there, then technology is becoming kind of like a fundamental right, especially access to the internet. It makes the biggest difference. And I know, in lots of different places in the world, broadband internet access isn't available. Sometimes the devices aren't available, or sometimes you have internet access or the devices and they're just subpar. They're just not as effective as they are for other people. In fact, in the community where I live right now, it's so rural that not everybody has really great high-speed internet access, and it makes a big difference. It's something that that the teachers have to be aware of even when they do their assignments. It would be easy to say, oh, we're going to do this fun digital activity, and so I'm going to send it home with you as a homework assignment. Well, that creates inequities for a lot of students where they go home and they might not have access to the internet, or they might have it only on a cell phone, or their device might not work as well as other students. And, we don't want to put students at a disadvantage when it comes to learning. We want it to be something that is easily equitable and accessible for everybody. And so how do we address the digital divide? I think there are small things that we can do in our classrooms, like we need to identify where those inequities exist, and we have to try to minimize putting students in those inequitable situations. Kind of like I mentioned the homework example right there. That's one small thing we can do for the digital divide is, not send students home with technological expectations that are unfair to them because they don't have access. But I think bigger picture too, we need to go bigger than the classroom. We need to advocate in our schools and in our school districts and to our governments. We need to advocate for them to do whatever they can to support those that don't have access to technology. I know there are lots of programs really all around the world that are trying to get broadband internet access, high-speed internet access available to everybody. And that's a start. But we still have lots and lots of students that don't have access. And so, I think education should be a fundamental right, and everybody should have access to the best opportunity to get that education. And so I think that's something that we all need to keep fighting for.
Ensuring equal access is so important for equitable education. I remember I saw this back during the COVID-19 pandemic when people were locked in different places. Some of us had the privilege of being at home and having access to laptops to join the classes. But many of my classmates did not have that particular privilege, I would say, because they were in some other area and they did not bring their laptops with them. So they were joining through the phone and they weren't able to get the same experience that we were getting based on the tools that the teachers were using.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So looking ahead, how will AI's rapid advancement affect the grassroots of education? And in your opinion, what ethical considerations should teachers and schools address to enhance learning without compromising the student privacy or equity?
Oh my goodness, we could do a whole episode about this question. I think this is there's so much to this. So how will AI's rapid advancement affect the grassroots of education? I think it can definitely be a very positive factor. One of the things that makes me very happy about this is that since ChatGPT came out, there has been a large language model. ChatGPT is a large language model. There's been access to capable large language models basically for anybody who has internet access. And so to some extent, that means that we all have access to some of the very best language models that are leaps and bounds better than anything that anybody has had for the longest time. And so that means that if we can access it and we're able to ask it questions and have it explain things to us and help us to generate text or generate images or whatever, that puts a lot of us at an advantage. And the nice thing is that because there are free models available, basically anybody who has access to the internet has access to these powerful models. And so it means that, if you want to be an entrepreneur, you can learn a lot about entrepreneurship by just asking the language model. If you want to get started with your business plan, it can help you draft the beginning of one. If you want to start to create marketing messages or get ideas for products, it can be your, basically your collaborator. And that's huge for anybody that has access to that. I think that's fantastic. Now, of course, the other side of this too is the digital divide that we were just talking about earlier, isn't it? Because now we're starting to see that it's not just the free models that are out there. Now we're starting to have paid premium models that are more capable. So now, again, we start to see that digital divide where the people who have more means are given an advantage. And so, that's a concern that I think that we have to be aware of in education, is that if we really truly want to make education available to everyone and to make it a high quality education, we need to find ways to break those barriers down. And then you brought up another important point, which is student privacy as well. Data privacy is a huge part of artificial intelligence. You've got these enormous companies that are using data to create these powerful programs. The data set that these AI models are trained on, they gather data from all over the place, and a lot of times it's not through ethical means. So I think there's a couple of things we need to take away from this, from students is, first of all, we don't want our students to become the product that these technology companies monetize. Because if the data is what they're using to create the product, then that could potentially put students in a position to be exploited for their profit. So I know some companies, like for instance, I know Microsoft's AI model Copilot has a way where schools can set it up so that student data isn't training the model. And so I think little things like that are huge. And whenever we use any sort of tool that accesses artificial intelligence, we need to be reading the terms of service. The end user licensing agreement that talks about what we're giving away, how they're using data. And so I think we can't fall asleep at the wheel, so to speak, when it comes to all of that. But I think it's also up to us as teachers to help students to understand the implications of whenever they use a tool and it says that it's free, it's not really free because we are the product that's being sold. We become the product, and so it's important for students to understand that as they go forward, that their data is a commodity that these companies really, really want. And so whenever you use a tool that's free, it's not really free. You're giving away something. You might not be giving away money, but you're giving away something. So yeah, like I said, we could talk about this probably for an entire show, but I think that there are some definite important issues to keep in mind when it comes to teaching and learning in the era of AI.
When we talk about AI, it can prove as a very positive thing for explaining things. For example, students can, if you don't understand a particular concept, just write in a prompt that, okay, explain it to a 10-year-old, like you would do to a 10-year-old or to a 15-year-old, or any other prompt that you would find suitable. And then also, so basically it provides a positive way in that sense. The students can use the potential that AI offers, the positives that it offers, but everything has pros and cons. And talking about the cons, like you mentioned, when you say that an app is free, nothing is free in this
Right.
sense. Your data is something that they're taking away from you, and it's important to understand what you're giving away to these companies to train their models, and if you're all right with that. So I think it's important to make terms and conditions visible and more accessible to people so that they're able to understand what exactly these things are taking from us. And with that, we can have more transparency and more trust with these systems. So definitely, apart from that, I think AI holds so much more promise for the future of education.
I think it definitely does. You're right.
All right, so it's been a great conversation so far. Keeping the energy high, let's dive right into our next segment. Mr. Matt, are you ready for a rapid fire round?
I am ready. Let's do it.
Buckle up, folks. First question coming up. Uh, Sir, if you could have a conversation with your future self, what's the first question that you would ask?
Hmm. Since we have to do rapid fire, I can't think about this too much. I think the question is, are you happy? We have so much control over our own happiness. And so many of our decisions can guide that. So I think that's probably one of the first questions I would ask is, are you happy and what are you doing to get there?
Same Z's. I would literally ask the same question because it's one of the most important things to be happy in life, to be satisfied that you have achieved your goals.
Yes.
So, moving on to the next question. Mr. Matt, imagine textbooks had personalities. What kind of personality would a traditional textbook have?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. That's a loaded question for me because I wrote a book called Ditch That Textbook. And so if textbooks had personalities, that might change the way that I worded that book of mine called Ditch That Textbook. But I feel like they would have most of them would have very serious personalities. Not finding the fun and finding the joy and everything, but kind of like too emphasized on the work and not emphasized on the joy. I think that's what personality they would have.
Absolutely. If I had to imagine the textbooks, back here in India, we have competitive exams like JEE Mains and Advanced for engineering and NEET for the medical exams, which is very much under the limelight right now, along with many others. So, along with that, we are supposed to also give our year-end board exams that we need to crack to finish our schooling. So for that, students generally use two types of books to prepare, if not more. The first type is the one which is prescribed by our national curriculum. It's like it's like a trustable friend that you can have that can provide you with the basics. It can lay the foundation, and
Yeah.
it's literally the kind of friend that you would expect to always turn up on time. On the other hand, you have certain books that you use to just practice, regurgitate,
Yeah.
and those we refer to those as what do you say, reference books. And I would
Mhm.
think of them as drill sergeants because
Oh.
they're very particular about things, about discipline, and they would do everything just to make you crack that particular exam. So
Mhm.
that's how I would visualize it. All right.
Mhm.
So
Yes.
now we know that you've written about teaching textbooks. So, Mr. Matt, what's one outdated teaching practice that you would like to ditch?
Oh my goodness. Okay. This one might be a little bit controversial, but go with me on this. One outdated teaching practice that I'd like to ditch is homework. So, one of my books that I wrote was called Ditch That Homework, which was a book that I co-authored with another a math teacher named Alice Keeler. And our goal in writing that book was to basically say, if you're not getting the results out of the homework that you give, what could you do instead? And I feel like so many schools all over the world really do homework and ask students to do homework because that's the way that it's always been done. And I think they also sort of over exaggerate the amount of results that they get out of homework. And I don't think that it's as effective as maybe we think, but then it's also having a negative impact in a variety of ways in our students' lives when it comes to stress, when it comes to fighting with parents, even when it comes to creating misunderstandings about content because they don't have a highly qualified teacher there to support them. So, and especially in an era of AI, traditional homework is going to become less and less and less relevant, I think. So I think that if we ditched homework all the way across the board, it wouldn't hurt nearly as bad as some people think that it would.
All right. So you would like to ditch homework. And that's very interesting because now we have the advent of AI. We have AI coming in, and you don't know what students are doing at home. So they
Yes.
can obviously use AI to write all the answers, and true learning won't happen then. So that was a great answer. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Miller. As we come to the end of this episode, let's move towards some deeper inspiration now and wrap up all the key learnings and takeaways from this episode in our last segment, the Inspire segment. Mr. Miller, who or what has been your biggest inspiration in life?
Oh my goodness, my biggest inspiration in life. I mean, again, it could go in a variety of different directions. Today, I'll pick my own kids. So I have 3 children. One of them just graduated high school and is getting ready to go to university in the fall. And then I have 2 others that are going to be in high school. So they're 15, 16, and 18 right now. And they inspire me to be the best version of myself because, I see the future in them. And really, this connects to my students that I've had in the classroom too, because I see the future in them too. And I always feel like I want to be at my best and I want to model what people should be and how people should treat each other and how they should, do their work in this world and live their lives in this world. And so they inspire me to be the best in myself so that I can see the best come out of them.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Being the best versions of yourself, the people who empower you to do that, they are the ones who will always stay with you and are the most inspirational beings that you could ever have in your life. They are gifts. So, moving on to our next question. What words of inspiration were given to you, Mr. Miller, that you would like to pass along to others?
Oh, words of inspiration. So I'll start with some school inspiration because when I started teaching, I quickly learned that you don't have to always do things the same way that everybody else does. And I think that was an important. Those were some inspiring words that I eventually learned that took me a little while to learn. That for me, teaching straight out of the textbook wasn't getting it done, and it also didn't feel like a good reflection of who I was as a teacher and how I wanted to show up to my students. And so that was where I had to take a look at the way things were going and try some new things. And it meant that I was going to fail sometimes, but failure isn't a bad thing because, we can learn a lot from it. There's this quote that is attributed to Thomas Edison, who said that, when it took him forever to create a light bulb, he said, I just found 1,000 ways not to make a light bulb before I finally found the one that did. And so, sometimes that's the way that we learn is, sort of through trial and error. And then sometimes you stumble upon the best things that you would never try if you just kind of kept doing things the same way all the time. So that's probably my big inspiration, I'd say, to teachers, to students, really to anybody in this life is, to try things, to be willing to go outside of your comfort zone and try things, because sometimes it won't go so well, but you'll always learn. And you may find this, inspiring new way of living or doing your work that you never would have found otherwise.
I couldn't agree more with you, sir. Being the best version of yourself can sometimes be very challenging. And because of that, people generally tend to follow the flock. But you need to be yourself in order to be the change that you wish to see in the world. And that means thinking outside the box and experimenting with new things. And whenever you have some obstacles in your way and you fall, embrace failure, learn from that, and get back up even stronger. So that was some great words of inspiration, sir. And finally, for our last question, can you give all our listeners a call to action? What can we children and young people do to make the world a better place?
Oh, to make the world a better place. I think probably my best answer, to sum it up in one word, is to empathize. To empathize. I'm thinking that, you look at the sort of the design thinking principles that people use to try to help solve problems and everything. And one of the early ones and a lot of those models is to empathize with others, which means that you look at the situation that other people are in and you try to put yourself in someone else's shoes and think, what are they probably feeling? What is their lived experience? What are they going through right now? And is there anything that I can do to support and help that? And I think if you want to make the world a better place in a variety of different ways, if it means improving your relationships with your family, or building a career, or being the best student that you can be, or being the best violinist, or whatever, being the best skier that you can be, anything that you want to do. I think if you can put yourself in the shoes of other people, and try to figure out how you can make the world a better place for them, I think is a good way to go.
Yes, empathy is a skill that is very important for today's age. Generally, we tend to get so involved in lives that we don't even think about the other person. It happens so many times. So it's very important to, for a moment, stop and put yourself in the other person's shoes and view the perspectives. It can really build your own character, and it can definitely make the world a better place. That's a big takeaway for all our listeners today. Mr. Matt, I couldn't thank you enough for taking out your time and joining us on today's episode, listening to your entire journey and all your insights into ditching the boring and transforming classrooms into brilliant places for students to thrive was fantastic. And I'm sure all our listeners also had an enriching learning experience from this conversation as well.
Well, thank you so much. It's been great to be able to answer all of the insightful questions and hear your reflections on them also. It's been a wonderful experience for me too.
Well, thank you so much, sir. To all our listeners, especially our gurus and teachers, be sure to check out Ditch That Textbook and their incredible resources, including the DTT blog, the online courses and guides, ebooks, and so many more resources and ideas to implement for your classrooms tomorrow for students like us. To deepen your knowledge on everything STEM, sustainability, and education, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast so that you can listen to in-depth discussions and insightful conversations with leading experts who are shaping a better world, just like Mr. Miller. If you love this episode, please help others find it by leaving a review and sharing it with your friends, your teachers, and family. Stay curious and be the change. Until next time, it's bye from the SDG Warriors.